Welcome, Nacho.
Thank you, thank you. So, quick goal for today. I will leave the stage happy if I manage to give you something that will help you improve your team impact in 2024. So this means making your team deliver more value for a user, maybe a startup growing faster, maybe some more recognition for you as product manager, and maybe some promotion in there. So hopefully that's the goal. And before we jump, I want to ask two questions. The first one is, who over the last 12 months, and please raise your hands, who over the last 12 months have been working with their team in some sort of practice improvement? So maybe you were going a bit slow, so you did a retrospective and tried to implement some changes. Maybe you were trying to implement some discovery practices, like some interview more users or experimentation. Maybe you change how you do roadmaps because they sucked, or you change how you prioritize, or something like that. Okay, many hands, many hands. And a second question, who here, again, raise your hand, knows about the Spotify model, or knows about how Amazon works backward from the vision from their six-pager, or how Booking.com releases many experiments per day? Okay, also majority of you. So this is at the core of the talk today, because we know how the best companies work. We know how, as I was saying, Spotify does their beautiful model, how Amazon is working backwards, and all these great companies are doing the stuff they do to be great. But actually, the problem is that most of us are still trapped in some companies that are working in ways that are not making us able to deliver great products, which means that, or we usually call those feature factories, or focusing more on the output than on the outcome, or a project-oriented model, and so on. But essentially, teams are not really empowered, and we are not delivering great results for our customers. And why this puzzles me is because if we know what to do, or how the best companies work, and we are trying to improve as product people how teams are doing, why are actually we not getting there? Haven't we actually tried? And yes, we have seen many different trainings. We have went to conferences, went to ProductTank events to get inspiration. We did put these practices, as you see at the beginning. Many of you already tried some improvements, and actually the money we are spending on this topic, it's said that the transformation industry 2023 is $2 trillion. So companies are investing a lot of money in trying to improve their practices, yet without making enough impact, or without really changing the ways of working. So I want to share a bit of a real example from my own experience to make this tangible for you. And maybe you have seen, since many of you raised your hand at the beginning, that you have undergone similar situations. My real example starts 11 years ago when I was working on this. It's a bit off the slide. Sure, it's one. It's a presentation mode, maybe. Okay, so I will walk through it and see if we can solve the technical issue. But essentially, this company was called Despegab.com. The company was largest travel company in Latin America, so like Expedia in Latin America. And this was my actual roadmap. So you can see here how old this is, because there's Windows 8 out there. So, and by the way, I didn't make this uglier in purpose. This is my real roadmap I was discussing with my stakeholders, even with that color over there, what I was thinking about. But anyways, you can see that this roadmap has a bunch of features in it. And essentially, at this moment, the company was really investing in mobile, was the hot new thing. It was the smartphone search at the moment. So we went from 0 to almost 10% of revenues in 12 months, crazy times. And we have 15 countries, so 15 country managers with many different verticals, travel companies, so hotels, flights, cars, and so on. Everyone wants a piece of the mobile roadmap. It was a new shiny thing. So I was discussing day in, day out with the stakeholders this roadmap, going through 30 features and trying to explain them why this was more higher priority than what they were trying to introduce into my roadmap. At what point I said, okay, I'm sick of this. This is not working. We need to change it. And I told my team, I was head of product for the mobile division, and I told my team, hey, we need to change and build this outcome-oriented roadmaps. I heard this guy, I think it was Chef Gothel at the moment, I'm not really sure, but say, well, we need to build this. So was Q1, say, well, for Q2, we will do this. And I said, okay, we will join again in a month, and you will work on making some outcomes for your teams, and we will join again and put that together. So off they went, they created these outcomes, we reviewed them, we put them together, we polished here together, I did some feedback, so we changed it. But essentially, by the next month, we were ready to show it to stakeholders and say, great, we have a roadmap now based on outcomes. So we sit down with the stakeholder, saying, or I sit down actually, was kind of going through my round of stakeholder alignment with now this new format, and they were amazed to say, hey, this is a great roadmap. I really love it. Very clear, very, very nice outcomes out there. When is my discount in checkout ready again? Total failure. So we had a very new shiny artifact, but we didn't manage to change in any meaningful way how the company was working. We didn't manage to change how we were aligning with stakeholders. So essentially, I collected from these failures some failures that I see over and over, and I want to briefly share. The first two are pretty related. So essentially, when we are trying to change some practice, the scope that we are taking is very narrow. So we are focusing on this particular topic instead of trying to think about the holistic way of how we work. And the second one is that these decisions are also ad hoc. So I was really having this pain about the roadmap, so I was trying to change the roadmap instead of having a more strategic approach, because at the end of the day, we were not ready to change to an outcome-oriented roadmap. We had so many more practices to change before jumping to that. Our goals were changing the practices instead of focusing on changing the culture and the ways of working. And how we were trying to approach it was, I throw to the teams, hey, this is how Chef Gothel does it, please go and do it that way, instead of thinking about how we need to adapt that practice to our particular context. And of course, the time investor says, hey, I will share with them in a meeting and I will meet them again in a month. So very low time commitment on my part. So I didn't do high commitment or stronger delegation of the work. So if you have one message to take from the talk today, is that instead of doing changing a practice like some isolated effort, you may as well treat your change as treat your culture change or your ways of working improvement as you will work in your products. And over the next 30 minutes, I will try to explain that. Before we jump to that, I already have introduction, but just to let you know who I am, I've been working in product for almost 20 years now. I've been in a bunch of companies that you may not know because I'm originally from Argentina. I work most of my life in Latin America, but you might recognize Sing over there was the company that had been moved to Europe a few years ago. And now I'm mostly working independently because I also been, as I call it, trying to share everything I learn and try to speak to anyone who may hear, who may want to hear what I learn. And I write frequently. A few years ago, I wrote Product Direction, which is not about roadmaps, it's about strategy and how you can connect that strategy to roadmaps and OKRs. I also have a podcast about strategy, and I teach at different institutions, and also I'm doing that at Product Direction, the company I'm now working in. Enough about me. Let's go back to the topic. I will try to give you some ideas on how you might treat this culture change as product improvements. So essentially, we need to do 5 things differently. Sorry about this very small chart, but essentially we will go through each of them, but we need to do assessment more holistically. We need to think about our growth and how we want to improve more strategically. We want to set more clear goals and plans, and we want to guide our teams to do that. And afterwards, we will review and iterate based on the cycle we did. I will try to make this a bit more tangible and not so abstract and theoretical with a real-life example. And this example I really like because it was my biggest professional challenge. It's a bit closer in time, so it was 4 years ago at a company called Best Day. And Best Day was one of the largest travel companies in Mexico, and essentially was a 30-year-old company, mostly run by the founding family. So you can imagine all sorts of political debates and all sorts of crap. The technical debt was massive, so they have coded the first things in Access, and when I showed the company, still some things were in Access. So that level of technical debt we're talking about. But they hire one of these strategic consultancy, not McKinsey, but kind of McKinsey, and they gave it the typical 40 list of things that you need to do to improve. But besides the 40 list of projects, they gave them 2 or 3 fundamentals that you need to change, and they say you need to change from this PMO that you are using to run technology or the technology department into a product model, or your competitors are doing that. So that's why they hire me to change all that mess. So that's how it relates also to what we will be discussing today. So I said that the first thing that we need to do is to assess things differently. And the way we assess things differently is that instead of looking at, as I was saying before, my roadmap and my head about the roadmap, so looking at the tree, we need to look at the biggest forest. And actually, I don't like to think about the forest. I like to think more of a map, because I really relate this to when you're doing opportunity mapping, or you're trying to get all the landscape and all the opportunities you have for improvement. And let's make this a bit more tangible. This is how you assess differently. What I did at Best Day. What I did at Best Day was conducting more than 80 one-on-ones when I joined the company with very different people, from all the stakeholders to the teams to some other disciplines, other counterparts. And this is my picture of my notebook, having all these meetings and collecting all these notes over and over. But the truth is that I was trying to make a holistic assessment, but I had no idea what I was really trying to assess. So I was collecting any note that anyone would talk about. And I finally put together this very big mind map with all the things that we need to change. So I managed to do something a bit holistic, but the conclusion after all this exercise was that I could have done it differently if I had a mental model on what I needed to actually assess. So probably from these 80 hours, I wasted more than half of those hours because I was not knowing what to really look for. And the second thing was important is that I realized later on that what people was telling me that how they were working was not really how they were working. So if you are doing interviews, or if you are trying to talk with your team and saying, hey, how we are doing things, it's much better to be evidence-based. And what I did afterwards was focusing on making these sessions in which we draw in a whiteboard how we are working, actually collecting their artifacts and trying to see more with more detail, but more realistically, how they were doing things. So this is what lets me to now believe that there is an even better way than doing it. This actually did the job, but nowadays I use what I call an evidence-based assessment, in which I have areas that I want to assess, some practices that I want to assess, and so the area has many practices, and within the practices we have concepts in which we can actually look for details on how teams are doing things. So I don't pretend you to read this example, just to clarify. But for example, this is about discovery planning and tracking. So do we have a discovery board? Are we tracking discovery execution? Are we sharing the results with stakeholders? And for each of those, you can actually list some evidence that will be we'll call the proof. That's maybe too hard, but the thing that shows you how the team is actually doing the practice, besides how they might told you they are doing the practice. So for the practice I'm currently doing, and this is kind of a big part of my job nowadays, but I collected more than 100 practices that I'm addressing, so this can get messy a bit very quick. But if this resonates somehow and you feel that you need to do a bit more holistic assessment on your ways of working, I have this template of an assessment that has the same areas that I'm using in my practice, and some of not only the description, but some of the articles on why this practice is important, especially for if you have, if you are more starting your career, or if you are a leader and you want to share with your team why some practice is important, you can go there and find it. And by the way, all the material is in Product Direction Substack, so hopefully easy to find. All right, so that's the first one. The first one is being holistic in the assessment. The second one is thinking how to grow differently. Because related to the example I shared at the beginning, most of the time, what I found is that product leaders or product organizations are trying to make change in a silo. So they're trying to think, hey, we need to improve, let's say, our discovery practices. So we need to do more interviews. And it tends to feel that we are in control of that. So we can actually do that by ourselves. But essentially, all of the practices that we're running are intertwined, much more like a spider network than a silo. So you can think about, for example, in my example on the roadmaps, if I didn't start by collecting opportunities, I will never be able to show an outcome-oriented roadmap because I never shared that with stakeholders. So they had no idea what I was talking about when I shared this outcome-oriented roadmap. So at Best Day, we did beautiful work that I was really eager to do and find it really interesting. And we share with the teams 6 pillars of the things that we try to change. And we actually even, sorry, who here knows a bit about Spanish? 2 people, great. So this says how we work. That's the that's the title of the booklet we put together. So I actually was found this book and found it very useful. We're trying to engineer this culture change. So this guy wrote a book called Culture by Design, and after reading it, we put our ideas in a booklet called How We Work, which is for onboarding, which is to kind of change the minds of the people who are working with us. The problem there was that we were trying to change everything at once. So the need for change was so big, and I felt it, and we really need to change fast, that I throw everything we have at the teams with these 6 pillars, with the booklet, and all that stuff. So the way I try to do it different now is to think about the current maturity stage of the team and what they need to grow into next. So this is my way of seeing it. So I'm not saying that this way is something that would work for you. You can rely on or you can build your own model. But the way I usually see the teams growing is that at the beginning, this P1 is like phase 1. So at the beginning, we have some way of growing to actual output. Why? Because most companies that start some transformation, they start by the actual transformation. So they are trying to build a higher cadence on how they deploy stuff. They are coming from waterfalls, so from big projects. So agile is usually first step. But of course, if you are doing only agile output, you are not doing product at all, or not close enough of how you should be doing it. And the second one, the second big pillar is when these teams that are usually still focused on the output, a more agile output, but still output, start building a sense for the outcomes. So what indicators are we trying to move? What are our KPIs? What are what is the result of the things that we are shipping? So this is what I call outcome sense. Once you have a bit more of a measurement of how your product is working, you start building some discovery to really see how you can move those needles. And then you go into being more strategic by having a more customer-centric and outcome-oriented empowered teams. And of course, you can go to Nirvana with continuous improvements. So why is this useful? Because if I were, for example, going into my roadmap problem, when I was working at Despegar, we were at this stage. So we have not done build any solution discoveries that can feed our opportunities that will be the discussion we need to have with the stakeholders before jumping to another roadmap. So now having this clarity, I know that we lack some steps before trying to change again this isolated practice. So again, this model I explained very quickly, but it's a stronger version or more detailed version of this, what I call the maturity model. And you can see here that it not only has the stages, but also the practices and how those practices look. And again, the material is there. If this resonates and you need some mental model to think about your team maturity and how you can help them grow, this is something that I hope will help you think about that. Third step is how we set expectations differently. And this is, to me, one of the things I feel more painful about, because most of the transformation efforts are not measured at all. So again, if you take like any of these companies that are doing digital transformation, they will say that they are doing they are transforming a company because they are doing trainings to people, and this becomes what is called now the transformation theater, in which we are talking about all the things we are doing to transform, but nothing is really changing in the business. So there is no clear impact. So what I've been trying to do, starting from this day, but now hopefully a bit better, is trying to make very, very clear the change that we are trying to do and how that will impact the business, which is basically our ultimate goal. That's the name of the talk, making more impact. So at Best Day, what we did 2 things that I think were kind of good compared to what I was just saying about how fussy these improvements may be. The first one was that we put some, again, the Spanish is because I'm taking the real slides from our deck, but we were trying to put some real concrete impact that we want to see at the end of our effort, our improvement efforts. And the other one that I don't recommend anymore is that we put into our OKRs one OKR that was related to transformation. So that The goal there was to, first of all, signal to the teams that this was important. So trying to build it in our existing cadences and our existing models to prioritize. And the other one is that it forces us to be very specific on how we were measuring the impact that we want to see on the teams. So this was more about measuring the practice. And by the way, now that I mentioned I don't recommend anymore, is because when you mix a business priority with a practice priority, then those things are comparison apples, so it's not really matching. But in any case, having very clear goals is very, very useful. And that's actually what I'm doing nowadays. This should have an animation, but I think I kill it. But in any case, my key goal is achieve impact on the business, or achieve impact in terms of how we are measuring the value the team is delivering. But this is a very lagging indicator. So since it is a very lagging indicator, what we try to do first is try to put together the improvement on the practice we are trying to see. So let me recap for a second. If you do today, let's say we're working on discovery and want to do more user interviews. If I'm changing this quarter, and I said with my team that this quarter we will do more customer interviews, we will only see the results of the interviews, hopefully the following quarter in the OKRs. So that's why it's a super lagging indicator. But we can start measuring today if we are doing more interviews. We can actually measure in a bi-weekly basis if we are doing more interviews or not. So having this clarity and this leading indicator, of course, there is a leap of faith that doing more customer interviews will help you with the impact. But we believe that by having this leading indicator, you give a strong signal to the team, and the team can start moving forward and start measuring their progress, and then they can keep looking at the lagging indicator afterwards. And being a bit more specific, what I started doing also is a bit more concrete description of how practice should look in the future. I don't pretend you to read all of this, but what just for as an example, this team was really focused on making sure that they were measuring the outcome at the end. That's a team that was on a very early stage of their product development process. So they say, we want each item on the backlog working, that was delivering value, to have an associated outcome hypothesis. This, again, is something that they can measure on a bi-weekly basis when they are doing the sprints. So are we having these items that we are trying to build on or work on? Do they have the hypothesis? So again, a leading indicator that makes the impact or the change that we are trying to make crystal clear, very different from how most teams are handling the improvement efforts. And the fourth one and last one is that you need to guide your team differently. And maybe the example here that I usually use is, who here knows Reforge? Okay. Very well-known school of product training, let's put it that way. They have very great courses, but the point here is that courses are usually not enough to make change possible. So we as product leaders or as product people, well, as product leaders, we send people for training. As product people, we take training. And essentially, the problem is that once we are done with the training, now we'll go back to work, and there is a completely different context. And we don't have anyone to help us implement this in our own context, in our own company. So the change, I won't say anything bad about training. Training is great. I actually run training a lot, so I will be the first one to encourage training. But what happens after a training is what's really important. So you need to give people a space to practice the skill. So that's why I usually call it workshops, an environment in which, okay, we know about the skill, let's put it to practice, and let's see if we can really make use of it, if we really understood it, and we can adapt it to our context. And finally, building a culture of coaching. So this can be one-on-one coaching by the leader, or even between peers, if they know how to help others implement some particular change. So building this is quite important, and again, quite different from, if you remember my first example, I say, hey, look at this video of Chef Kotel and go build your outcome roadmaps. This is completely different on how you must actually do it. Okay, nowadays, probably I went too far ahead, but nowadays what I'm doing is trying to do 3 steps. So first one is giving clarity about the skill, which is kind of the training part. With the training part, we go into practice, so building some scenario that is close enough to how the company is working, to have some practice that is outside their product, but relatable enough. And finally, guiding teams with this coaching I was mentioning before. Okay, so best day. That's the end. How did it end for best day? We had amazing results. So this is by the way, the bar is going lower because it was a reduction OKR. So it's not bad, trust me. But essentially, we had effect on our business, which was great. This is a 12-month measurement. And then we also have effect on the practices. So as I was saying before, I started with OKRs, but then I split it. Say, hey, we will measure the impact on one hand on the business, and we will measure how our practice grows. And there was a very nice correlation between the two. And this is how we started saying, taking more seriously or making the correlation between our leading indicator and our lagging indicators. And this is something that, again, as product leaders, we always need to keep in sight, because that's what the stakeholder or the CEO or your boss will ultimately care about. Okay, so we went through these 5 steps. Well, actually, the last one is review and iterate. Now that you have the assessment at the beginning, you can review based on assessments, or we can kind of redo the assessment. But some of you may not be, or maybe thinking about what's the relation between treating your culture improvement as you will treat your product or your product improvements. And I don't want to throw another concept at you, but essentially I split the product development process in 3 big areas. By the way, that's part of the book as well. So I say direction is all about strategy and selecting the right objectives, the right problems to solve. Discovery is about validating the solutions and what is the right way to give something that is valuable for the user and receive value for the impact for the business. And finally, delivery is about how we iterate on that to achieve the right results. So if you think about the steps that I just shared, you can see that it's essentially thinking about how we will do some improvement in your ways of working, thinking of your ways of working as your products. You will do the assessment and the growth strategy that is pretty much related to how you will do direction for a company, how you will set up the strategy for a company or a product. You will do some goals and planning, which is basically breaking this down and refining and analyzing how we are doing the practice to make some milestone for growth. And finally, you will go through the implementation with some more iterative steps that happens on the weekly or bi-weekly one-on-ones when you are guiding your team. And essentially, you review and iterate to optimize and make sure that you are making the impact. So the message here is, if you treat your your culture or ways of working improvement as a product improvement, you can see that you don't need to use these 5 steps, but at least you can start thinking about your ways of working differently, and you can make more thoughtful impact on your team. I have been working beyond this day. I have been working on this for the last year and a half now. So I put my thoughts together in an ebook. So if you want to download that, another QR code. And then also, if you want the slides, you can find them at productdirection.co/events. That's it. Thank you.